Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Shri Sri Radhe Govinda Dev ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. How is everyone? Good to see you all for another session. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending upon where you are. Thank you for joining in. If you want to put your phone down and just listen, we'll be here. If you'd like to interact, we'll be here. Thank you again for joining in. Today's session is going to continue just a little bit of the sweetness of Krishna's pastimes in Brajabhumi, in Vrindavan Dham, because I think we all just need a little bit of lightness and laughter. I know I do. Sometimes the day has been really long, and sometimes it feels like the best prayers are those that are able to be said with a smile. No matter what is going on, no matter the hardships that we are facing, no matter the obstacles, we can find an escape in Krishna's pastimes. And as we open up and we just begin to speak about Krishna's pastimes, Krishna is there with us. The entire spiritual abode is there with us. And we can just take some time out of our day and escape to a place where there is no anxiety. Well, not material anxiety. There is some anxiety, as we will hear about later. But even the anxiety is enjoyable, because this anxiety is linked to Krishna. It's linked to seeing him. It's linked to watching his pastimes. It's linked to just trying to find out what will Krishna do today. So we are going to go on a great many adventures with our best friend. Hopefully we'll escape, we'll smile with him, we will laugh with him, and we will just discover the healing and soothing balm of his pastimes. But as always, in order to prepare ourselves with the right mindset to journey into the mystical and magical realm of Vrindavan Dham, we are going to begin with singing together Jai Radha Madhava. So if you're at home and you feel like singing along, please do. If you feel like clapping along, please do. Jai Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari Jashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatiravana Chari Jashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatiravana Chari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Jai Radha Madhava Radhe Govinda Jaya Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Jaya Radhe Govinda Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda Dev Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. So I'm going to begin today with a meditation from Premamala. And it deals with things that I hope I'm not alone with dealing with. I hope that these are things that we all kind of deal with. And it deals with that same soothing touch of the Lord and his pastimes that I was speaking about just before we sang Jai Radha Madhava. And my friend Krishna Loka Creations, Hannah, was reading the story of the Shamantaka Jewel, which is one of my absolute favorite pastimes in Krishna book. And she spoke about how Krishna was fighting with Jambavan, and Jambavan felt such weakening in all of his limbs, and he felt great pain and fatigue. And then Krishna, with the palm of his lotus hand, he spread his hand all over the body of Jambavan. And just that one touch from Krishna's hand was enough to cure him of all of the fatigue, all of the pain, everything that he had been feeling from fighting hand to hand with Krishna for 28 days and nights nonstop. So we can only imagine what kind of fatigue that would bring on. And being struck by the powerful arms of Sri Krishna. They say that the arms of the Lord are where all of the demigods obtain their abilities. Within the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it explains that that is the activity place of all of creation, of all the demigods. Anything that is powerful gets their strength by performing upon the arms of the Lord. So we can only imagine how powerful Krishna's arms are and how handsome and strong they are, forever marked with the teeth marks of the Keshi demon, because he shoved his hand down the Keshi demon's throat. So handsome Krishna is described with arms like pillars, which are forever marked by the teeth of Keshi. And he was striking the body of Jambavan over and over and over again. You can only imagine, Jambavan is one of the oldest living creatures in all of creation. Jambavan was created by Lord Brahma himself, and so he doesn't really have a race. He is a species unto himself. So he is described as Riksharaj. He is a rickshaw, which doesn't have a direct English translation. It is a Sanskrit word that is somewhere between beast, somewhere between man, and all of this combined. He is an entity unto himself. And he's extremely old. So he is created by Lord Brahma. He has seen many, many incarnations of our Lord come and go. He has seen Krishna's pastimes again and again, because he is not beholden to just one universe. Even he himself says he circumambulated the earth 21 times. As his way of circumambulating the Lord, he circumambulated the earth 21 times. He was there when Vamana took on a gigantic form to span the universe with 2 steps. He was there when Sri Ram fought with Ravana. He was there at the dawn of time, and he is still there when Krishna makes his own appearance in Dwapara Yuga 5,000 years ago. And in fact, Jambavan is still living today. So Jambavan is incredibly old and incredibly powerful. We can just imagine when you hear about, in fantasy novels, you hear about these old majestic beings, and they have all of this ancient power, and they exude all of this mystical energy. This is like Jambavan. He's such a mystical being, but he is weakened by Krishna. And in fact, that is how he realizes that he is fighting none other than Krishna. He realizes that no one would be able to affect him like this, so it must be his Supreme Lord. So he is experiencing such incredible fatigue, he's experiencing such pain, and he realizes that, oh no, what have I done? Somehow, in my anger, I was completely blinded to who I had come in contact with. He had been meditating on his worshipful Lord Ram ever since Lord Ram had left in the previous Yuga. So for millions of years he had been meditating on the form of the Lord, and now the Lord had come before him, asking for the famous Shamantaka Jewel, and he denied him. And so they have this incredible battle, and he realizes that I've been fighting the life of my life. What have I done? What am I doing? I couldn't even recognize him. And there are many poems within Premamala which express that feeling of how the Lord has appeared to us in our lives through different miracles, through different circumstances. Our Lord has guided us. Our Lord has been there comforting us, and yet we have not seen him. So one of my friends is asking, is Jambavan a Vanara? No, he is a rickshaw, and that's a beast and a being that is singular and specific to him alone. He was created before the Vanaras. And the Vanaras are a race of celestial monkeys. It is another word which doesn't necessarily have a direct translation in English. They are monkeys, but they are beasts. They are tall. They can transform their shapes. They are expansions of the potencies of the demigods. So they have magical, mystical powers. They are woodland creatures, very much connected to the earth, and very much connected to the trees and the grass. So they are celestial in that way. And if you kind of think of fantasy novels and you hear about elves and all of these woodland creatures that are very, very connected to the element of the earth, Vanaras are like that. So, but Jambavan was created before all of them. And so Jambavan is a rickshaw. And he is known as Riksharaj, which is something completely different. Sometimes within Indian cinematography, they make him look something like a bear. But not quite. To my understanding, and as far as I've heard from lectures with Srila Prabhupada, he is a being that defies almost explanation and description. He is beyond conception. That is how amazing he is. And so sometimes they say that they liken his form to descriptions of Bigfoot and all of these mystical creatures that people have claimed to see and that can manipulate space and time and can be invisible at will. And so they say these huge beasts like Bigfoot and the Yeti and all of these things, they can be sort of likened to beings like Jambavan, but still not quite, because he's so much greater than that and so much more mystical than that. And this is why I love Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is filled with magic. There is Govinda's magic everywhere we look. And nothing is what it appears on the surface. There are adventures at every turn. And everywhere we look, there are mystical beings ready to help us. So I love the fact that if you were loving fantasy novels like Lord of the Rings, if you enjoyed these different authors who could create these worlds, there's nothing that compares to Krishna and what Krishna creates and the adventures that he goes on. Which is why I love the readings of Krishna book that happened just before this one. Because you get to go and escape on the adventure of a lifetime. The adventure of many lifetimes, in fact. And they're all histories. It's not just mythological. These are histories, these are things that occurred. Things that are still occurring in another universe. Every day Krishna's pastimes are happening. So we can find new ways to celebrate every day. Because every day Krishna has done something extraordinary. And these great beings, they run to those places where these pastimes are being recited. So just as they say that Hanuman runs to hear whenever the name of Sri Ram is chanted, whenever the pastimes of Sri Ram are chanted, the same is said for all of these great beings. They run to that place where these adventures of Sri Krishna are being recounted, where people, souls like you and I, gather together in like-minded company, and we sit around the campfire of our devotion, and we just say, okay, we're going to come together and we are going to enliven each other. And all of those beings that we cannot see, we will enliven each other with the pastimes and the great adventures of our hero. So, there is a piece that I adapted from Srimad Bhagavatam called Fighting God. And it is a piece about Jambavan. And so, I'm going to begin with that. Jambavan faltered. His fist struck out but connected with nothing but air. His knees buckled and he fell to the floor. He blinked, but once his eyes closed, he felt as though it was almost impossible to open them again. He had been fighting for 28 days. That was nothing for him. He was the strongest living thing on the planet. He knew that for certain. 28 days was a blink of an eye. He had seen generations of powerful warriors come and go. He had been created by Brahma, the creator himself. Who was this opponent? At first glance, Jambavan thought that he was nothing more than a common thief. Surveying the vast forest that he called his home, Jambavan came upon a brilliant jewel in the mouth of a lion roaming his jungle. He had never seen anything like the jewel before, and he knew instantly that his son would love to play with it as a toy. His son was always running after shiny objects. Jambavan killed the lion without difficulty and brought the jewel home to his son, who was, as expected, overjoyed. Suddenly, he was alerted by the nurse screaming. The woman who helped with his son's care was diligent, careful, and competent. She cared for the boy as though he were her own son. Jambavan raced to where he could hear her calling for him in distress. There was someone standing over his son and the jewel, hand outstretched as though he wanted to take the jewel from his son. Jambavan couldn't see anything else. His rage took over. He began to fight with the stranger. That was 28 days ago. Now, for the first time, he began to wonder who this person was who was getting the better of him. He had seen the times of great kings. He had even seen the time of the great king, Lord Ramachandra. He knew that his worshipful Lord was the only person who could have ever weakened him. His heart began to stir. Jambavan's huge muscles were pummeled, and his entire body was in pain. But what he felt in his heart was unmistakable. He hadn't felt that kind of feeling since his Lord Ram was on the planet. Jambavan looked up into the face of his opponent. He was standing over Jambavan, his face surrounded by an effulgence which put the jewel that lit the entire cave palace to shame. Beads of perspiration decorated not only his face but his entire body. Streaks of dirt covered his arms and hands from the fighting that they had been engaged in. His eyes were wide like the open petals of a lotus. His forehead was broad like a half moon and adorned with decorations in sandalwood. The sandalwood decorations were scattered and smeared from their weeks of exertion. His cheeks were flushed and mud streaked from fighting with Jambavan. But his beautiful, reddish lips were turned up at the corners in a small, enigmatic smile. It looked almost as though he were ready to engage in battle once more. He hardly looked fatigued, where Jambavan was completely beaten. He had no energy left to give. He looked closely again at the stranger's smile, and that was familiar. More than familiar. Jambavan's eyes narrowed. His coloring was different. He was dark, bluish, nearly black, like a dark and heavy monsoon cloud at the start of the rainy season. His Lord Ram was greenish, like fresh durva grass, but equally as dusky. But in his heart, Jambavan, all of a sudden, knew. This had to be his Lord, come again in a different form. Jambavan didn't realize that tears of love, relief, and gratitude had slipped from his eyes until they landed on his hands. All along, he had been fighting with the Lord of his heart. He was so worried about protecting his family And he was so sure that there was no one in this realm that could beat him, that he had failed to recognize that his very own Lord, that he had been yearning to see for centuries, now stood before him. Jambavan pressed his palms together, offering his respects to the Lord, and bent his head in prayer. This small scene, of course, is part of the larger story in the Srimad Bhagavatam called the Shamantaka Jewel. That was the name of the jewel that Sri Krishna and Jambavan had been fighting over. The jewel had been given to King Satyajit by the sun god. Satyajit had been worshipping the sun god with such love and devotion and was rewarded with this glorious jewel, which was so powerful that just by worshipping the jewel, it would produce 170 pounds of gold each day. Satyajit became arrogant because he had the jewel, and I can't really blame him. I get arrogant when I find $20 while walking down the street. Krishna, who was advisor to the emperor, who was Krishna's own grandfather at the time, advised Satyajit that the best of everything should be given to the king so that it could be used for the welfare of the entire kingdom. He requested Satyajit to give the jewel to King Ugrasena. Satyajit refused, convinced that Krishna just wanted the jewel for himself. Satyajit loaned the jewel to his younger brother Prasena, who wanted to ride through the kingdom and show off the new family wealth, which, if you ask me, is a little extravagant. Prasena went riding through the kingdom with a jewel that made just the wearer look that much more beautiful and effulgent. And he was enjoying the fact that he looked amazing. Prasena was attacked by a lion who killed him, and the lion took the jewel. Jambavan saw the lion with the jewel, killed the lion, and brought the jewel back for his son to play with. Meanwhile, in Krishna's home of Dwarka city, Satyajit began to spread nasty rumors about Krishna once his little brother Prasena failed to return. He told whoever would listen that Krishna wanted the jewel for himself, and simply because Satyajit refused to give it to him, Krishna must have killed Prasena and taken away the jewel by force. So he spread the rumor that not only was Krishna a thief, but a murderer as well. Krishna, the Supreme Person, didn't like his reputation being tarnished like this. Who would? Krishna told the citizens that he would go and find the jewel and bring it back to Dwarka. The citizens decided to follow Krishna, and they all set out looking for the Shamantaka jewel. There is another piece that I adapted from that small section of Srimad Bhagavatam of the citizens thinking about Krishna. Let's see if I can find it. That might have to be a story for another time. But that piece is one of my favorites. Just imagine, Krishna saves all of Dwarka city. He erects the fort of Dwarka. He inlays it with emeralds, countless jewels. He has spires, citadels, towers with crystals inlaid at the tops of the towers, so that these emerald crystals glow and they send up a greenish light throughout all of the surrounding area around Dwarka city. If we want to know about an emerald city, That is Dwarka. And he transports all of the citizens from Mathura to Dwarka in the middle of the night so that they won't be upset, so that they will never fear that they will have to move, that they will be inconvenienced at all. Krishna saves his own people from inconvenience. One would think, he built the entire city. He had Vishvakarma help. He did all of these things. The least the citizens could do is move. But no. Krishna has this fort erected in the middle of the sea, and then he personally, with his own mystic potency, moves everyone there. How amazing is Krishna as a friend, as the advisor, as the prince of your city. Can you imagine if you had a problem in Dwarka city? You could go to the court of the king, Ugrasena. You could go to the assembly hall. But who would you see in the assembly hall? Although Ugrasena was the king, everyone looked to Krishna for advice. Everyone sought out Krishna. They just waited all day for the time when Krishna would enter the assembly hall. They would spend their time talking about what decisions he had made the day before and what beautiful decisions he would make that day. The city was happy. Yes, everyone would go to the assembly hall every day, whether they had a problem or not. They would go just to see Krishna. And there he would grace everyone with his handsome features, his merciful glance, his gorgeous smile. And the wonderful thing about this Sudharma assembly hall is that the effects of time were not felt at all. Once you entered the Sudharma assembly hall, time did not act. No one grew old. There was no fear of disease. Death doesn't even act upon anyone once they're in the Sudharma assembly hall. So it's like all time stops, which is such a beautiful place to have darshan of Krishna. Imagine you get to enter this mystical assembly hall where everything stops, the outside world fades away, and you just get to gaze upon Krishna. Srila Prabhupada writes in the Nectar of Devotion that they would have very many court proceedings, and sometimes Sri Balaram would fall asleep. And he would speak, he would talk in his sleep, and he would talk about the pastimes of Vrindavan. And he would say things like, "Oh Krishna, why don't you make short work of this Kaliya? He's disturbing everyone. Make everyone happy again by subduing this Kaliya." And all of the Yadus would laugh. And that would sort of awaken Balaram, who would yawn greatly and then resume his nap. So just imagine the big brother of the entire universe. These court proceedings are a little bit soporific, which is one of those SAT words, which means sleep-inducing. And he gets so tired that he falls asleep in the middle of all of these court proceedings. You all handle it. And he has such confidence that his brother is there. And he knows who Krishna is. That he takes a nap. But time does not influence anyone during all of these court proceedings. Everyone is there just able to gaze upon Krishna and Balaram, their heroes, who are somehow mystically able to do anything. But suddenly, this one envious king comes, and he starts a rumor that Krishna must have wanted the jewel. And so he must have killed mercilessly this Prasena. And how terrible it is that he must have killed Prasena. And now everyone begins to look at Krishna as a murderer. How sad must Krishna have felt that his own citizens now look at him with suspicion. The very person that they run to save them, they now condemn him. They speak harshly about him. So if you have ever found yourself in the midst of rumors or antagonizing comments from others, you're not alone. Even Krishna himself felt those same feelings. And he didn't enjoy his reputation being tarnished that way. After all, like I said, who would? And he decides that he is going to fix the situation. And the citizens decide to follow Krishna, and they all set out looking for the jewel. Krishna entered the dense forest after finding Prasena's dead body and the killed lion. Yeah, one person is asking, why didn't the citizens of Dwarka have faith that Krishna would never do such a thing? That's an answer I have to look up. I have to reconcile that. I have to pray to the great acharyas. And I know that they will send me their answer. I know a commentary will come. Because it is such a difficult thing to reconcile, isn't it? I think, and my sister held this opinion, and she says very vehemently, had it been the Vrindavan residents, they never would have believed it won. And they never would have let him go and find that jewel by himself. The residents of Vrindavan were sticking to Krishna like glue. If it was danger, and we read some nights ago that when Dhenukasura was there, the cowherd boys were running in fear one minute, and then the next minute they thought, wait a second, and they turned around and started beating up the demon, strangling him and throwing their little ball at him, you know? They gained so much strength that no one is going to conquer our friend. So I can only, and this is just a speculative guess right now, that their moods are mixed. They know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there's something about that awe and reverence that I think must have clouded their minds and their eyes. Because in Vrindavan, no one would have ever believed it. No one. And furthermore, I think they would have set out to look for the jewel themselves. Krishna would have tried to stop them. They would have dragged him along, but they never would have believed it. So I'll try and look it up and see what it is that had them believing that Krishna was this murderer. Because it's just one envious king. And Krishna is our hero. But one of the reasons they say Krishna willfully took on this false blame, because there's the story of Ganesh Chaturthi. And if anyone knows about Ganesh Chaturthi, it is a very, very common practice. So someone is asking, aren't the residents of Dwarka the same Brajbasis? No, they are not. They are different. The Brajbasis stay in Vrindavan, and then Krishna leaves and he goes to Mathura and later on to Dwarka. So the Mathura residents go with him to Dwarka, but the Brajbasis do not. They are very different, and their moods are different. The Dwarka Vasis address Krishna as Narayan. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they pray. Whereas we see in Vrindavan, the Brajbasis are very much of the mind of, let others think Krishna is whoever they think he is. He is just our cowherd boy. He's just our village boy. So they are different. So with the story of Ganesh Chaturthi, which August is a very good time for this story. But with the story of Ganesh Chaturthi, Ganesh and Chandra, the moon god, they get into an argument. And eventually Ganesh curses Chandradev that anyone who looks at you will be subject to false blame. And everyone gets upset. Who cannot see the moon? The moon is in the sky, granting everyone its audience. People will be blaming each other, killing each other over these things. All kinds of havoc will be wreaked. You must do something. And so Mahadev himself and Parvati Devi, they go to console their son. And they say, you must lessen this curse. Lord Ganesh says, fine. I will lessen the curse. Anyone on my birthday of Ganesh Chaturthi who worships me first will be exempt from this curse. But if they do not, and they see the moon, they will be subject to false blame. So it is a very, very common practice on Ganesh Chaturthi to make sure that you worship Lord Ganesh, especially before seeing the moon that day. So the story goes that Krishna was in Dwarka, and he looked into a bowl of milk that Rukmini Devi had handed him. And he sees the reflection of the moon. And Krishna himself says, oh no. And Rukmini Devi says, what happened? And he says, I've seen the moon, but it is Ganesh Chaturthi. We have not yet paid our respects to Lord Ganesh. And the curse goes that whoever sees the moon without first paying their respects to Lord Ganesh will be subject to false blame. And Rukmini says, but you are the Lord of Lords. And he says, but I still honor the word of my devotees. I still honor that. So he says, I must honor this curse. And he consults with his own advisors, and the advisors say, well, because you saw the reflection, it won't be such a grievous offense. You'll be subject to some false blame, but then the matter will be cleared up. So why? Externally, why do the citizens believe? Because Krishna upholds the word of his devotees, even at the cost of ruining his own reputation. So there is that story, which goes along hand in hand with this pastime. So isn't it amazing that even our Krishna gave all respect to the demigods and observed these holidays like Ganesh Chaturthi? So when we come across these great festivals and holidays, as devotees and lovers of our Krishna, we don't have to shun them thinking, oh, demigods, oh. We don't have to think that. We can remember the pastimes of our beautiful Krishna in connection with every single holiday and festival, because Krishna himself gave all respect. How beautiful he is. How gorgeous his pastimes are, that there are degrees, there are connections to be made with every festival. So, he bears the burden of this false blame of being called a murderer, which is such a huge offense. So one of my friends is asking, should we avoid looking at the moon on Chaturthi? My practice is to wake up early in the morning on Ganesh Chaturthi and remember the story of the Shamantaka Jewel. And then there's a beautiful verse from the Brahma Samhita, which glorifies, saying, I adore Govinda, the primeval Lord, who even Lord Ganesh places his tusks upon the feet of Lord Krishna, and thus gains his potency to remove all obstacles. So first thing in the morning, if we remember this story of the Shamantaka Jewel, there is great benediction and great benefit. And then if we remember this verse of the Brahma Samhita, and we remember the beautiful form of Govinda, who even Lord Ganesh adores, who gains his power of removing all obstacles and ushering in all auspiciousness from the lotus feet of Sri Govinda. That is as good as worshipping Lord Ganesh. And then, of course, if we have family festivities and ceremonies that we engage in, sure. Engage in those ceremonies with your families in a spirit of, I'm here with my family to give joy to all of my family members. Not only that, but also to ask Lord Ganesh, oh my dear Lord Ganesh, writer of the Vedas, O supreme poet, O best of those who can describe the pastimes of my Krishna, help me. Give me just an ounce of your devotion for Krishna. Help me in my spiritual life. And then Lord Ganesh is extremely pleased with us. And he's so ready to remove all of the obstacles to our devotional life. And then, if you happen to see the moon, you're okay. But we make sure that we do our due diligence first. So Krishna took on this burden of false blame and enacted this pastime out of kindness and to uphold the word of his very own devotees. And so he entered the dense forest after finding Prasena's dead body and the killed lion. Then they found a dark pathway which led deeper into the forest and to the cave dwelling of Jambavan. The citizens of Dwarka were too afraid to enter that pathway. Krishna told them to remain outside to wait for him to return. My sister also likes to say that had it been the Brijabasis, they probably never would have waited outside either. They would have followed Krishna to the ends of the earth if he allowed it. Those who have some experience with the Ramayana will remember Jambavan, the great mystical person. He is a riksha, and needless to say, extremely powerful. He was created by Brahma himself when the creator and the grandfather of the universe yawned. His lifespan is incredibly long, and he has seen many incarnations of Krishna. He is an extremely great devotee. However, when Krishna arrived to retrieve the jewel and saw Jambavan's son playing with it, Jambavan was called and began to fight with the Lord. And not just for 1 minute, but for 28 days without recognizing him. Why did it take Jambavan so long to recognize the Lord that he had worshipped millennium after millennium? The great teachers say that Jambavan had such a great attachment to his son and to his own strength. He was his children's protector. He was their father. So when he heard that someone was threatening his child because of that strong attachment, before he could even see who the intruder was, he immediately became angry and went charging out to fight with them. And he was proud of his incredible strength. Because Jambavan knew that he was the strongest person on the planet, he wasn't going to give up the fight until the other opponent was completely defeated. But when Jambavan saw that he himself was defeated, he knew that the only person who could have brought him down to that level, crushing not only his pride, but his strength as well, had to be none other than his very own Lord. Jambavan offered so many beautiful prayers and apologized to Krishna. It is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam that once Jambavan offered prayers, with the same hand that had been pummeling Jambavan, feeling like thunder striking him over and over, that same hand was smoothed over the body of Jambavan, feeling cooling and soothing like the softest lotus petals, freeing him from all of his pain, misery, and fatigue. Yeah. One of my friends is saying it's funny because Jambavan complains about being too old to travel to Lanka to find Sita. There is a playlist of untold stories of the Ramayana. And the great spiritual teacher who speaks about it is a Prabhupada disciple. And he says that because Jambavan is so old, he has seen the Ramayana enacted in different universes, in different times, again and again and again. So he already knows what's going to happen. So Jambavan is cursed to become old. And what happens is he knows what's going to happen. And so sometimes they say that Jambavan is caught mumbling to himself, a little bit of the spoiler of the story. So after the monkeys and the Vanaras come to the southern seashore and they resolve to sit and fast until death because they cannot find Sita, Jambavan is constantly mumbling to himself, oh, Hanuman will recover his powers, then he will find out that he is meant to go save Sita. And everybody says, what did you say? And he says, nothing, I'm old, don't mind me. And he kind of bides his time, and he waits for the right moment. And then he starts to tell Hanuman about his great mystical abilities. But yes, he says, I'm too old. One reason is because he is cursed to become old, and another reason is because he knows I'm not the one meant to do this. This is Hanuman's job. Hanuman can do this. This is the glory of Lord Ram's servant. So he allows Hanuman to perform his devotional service. And now, one of my friends is also saying, even after being such a great devotee, how could Jambavan have such great affection for his offspring? Is it okay for one to be so attached to his or her family while practicing devotion? Of course. Of course. So, in regards to having a family, they say that if the family takes away from one's spirituality, you do what you can. And eventually, at a certain point, it might be time to distance yourself from a family, but that is only if they are so negatively impacting your devotional life. However, if you are fortunate and you have those around you who are favorable to your devotional service, they don't stop you. They allow you to perform your devotional service. Then attachment to them is not just mere family attachment. You are attached to the devotees of the Lord. You are attached to those who can help you along the path of devotional service. So Srila Prabhupada writes that it's not attachment then. It is a spiritual community. And those families are not to be given up. He says there is no need for renunciation of that kind of family, because in the association of those family members, the spiritual world is already manifest. The Holy Dham is already present. So just as we are in each other's association here now, speaking about Krishna, we should never give each other up. We are meant to serve together. We are meant to be attached to one another because that attachment is based on devotional service. So that is why we have such a great responsibility to try and help our family members to become Krishna conscious. Because then our attachments are real and lasting, life after life. So the way we talk and serve with one another, the way we serve with our family members, that will endure because that is devotional service, and devotional service is eternal. So these children that he had were not actually mundane entities. As we see, his own daughter becomes the wife of Krishna. So now he gets the honor of being the father-in-law of Krishna. So this is a favorable attachment. His daughter was not just an ordinary person. There are very mystical pastimes associated with his daughter, which we'll have to get into another day, because Srila Rupa Goswami himself goes into uncovering the mysteries of all of these pastimes. So yeah, this is the glory and the magical, mystical potency of Jambavan. And this is what happens in a family of God-conscious people. Even if they don't call Krishna by name, it doesn't matter as long as they are God-conscious. Srila Prabhupada says that real religion means to know who is God and how to love him. So although they might call by a different name, although they might do it a little bit differently, we should be willing and ready to see the devotional service that is hidden within each of those activities if we can. And the question is, how is he strong enough to fight with Krishna? Even weakened and old, that was by like Treta Yuga standards. This is like, he is the strongest being in all of creation. He considers himself weak and old. But by usual regular standards, he's stronger than everybody. It just so happens that he considers himself weak because he is weaker than he was millenniums ago. So that's his own consideration talking. Oh, I'm old now. But you see, you're like, yeah, but you're a legend. He's legendary. He's the king of everything. But he considers himself old. So, for me, there are many lessons in this story which I've heard many times. But most recently in a lecture by His Holiness Radhanath Swami. Firstly, how many times are we attached to so many things? It could be our strength. It could be our looks. It could even be the people closest to us. It could be our reputation, our status in life, our plans that we make so carefully, especially when it comes to family. To my understanding, there's nothing wrong with being attached to your loved ones, but not to the point where it completely blocks out all of our intelligence and all of our capacities to serve. In this case, Jambavan's attachment clouded his ability to even recognize the Lord, which didn't work out very well for him. And our strong attachments, when or if they don't work out for us, those strong attachments often cause depression, anger, despondency, and even worse situations for us. We can often find ourselves in situations where we lose faith and trust in Krishna altogether. That's when we can say that our attachments are not serving us well. So Jambavan fought with Krishna. How many times does it feel as though we are fighting with God? Or even if we want to simply call it divine arrangement. How often do we have our ideas of the way things should go? And when that doesn't happen, we fight and fight and fight. If it was up to us, we would never give up. Just as Jambavan would never have given up. It took 28 days before he was completely crushed. And when we find that we are completely crushed by circumstances beyond our control, often by divine arrangement, then we accept defeat. But often, that defeat can make us turn away from our divine best friend. But in this, I see a lesson from Jambavan. When he was defeated, he knew that it was only the Lord who could do this. And he knew without doubt that he loved the Lord, so he bent his head with a heart full of humility and offered prayers. He apologized for all that he had done. He asked the Lord for his help in soothing his suffering, and the Lord obliged immediately. With the same hand that had been punching Jambavan, he rubbed that hand over Jambavan and all of his pain vanished. So, difficult as it may be, even when we feel defeated by divine arrangement, if we can push past our initial reaction to say, Krishna, how could you? Or at least that's often my initial reaction. If we can push past that and come to a place where we say, I know nothing happens in this universe without you. Forgive me. Please help me. I am in pain. I am suffering. And I am yours. Following the example of Jambavan in this story, we can see Krishna's reaction. The very same hand that seems to be snatching away our attachments and our ideas of how life should go, that same hand will ultimately soothe every single one of our miseries and pain. And with that prayer, we have to end here for tonight. But that means there'll be a part 2 tomorrow, Fighting Divine Arrangement, and the story of Jambavan and Lord Shri Krishna. All glories to Shri Vrindavan Dham. Hare Krishna. See you again soon.